Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. And it seems like we have a lot of students. Otherwise, y'all got real young faces in here. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. Unfortunately, this is a conversation I never thought we should have. And so let's get into it. The so-called president of peace has spent all his time in office dragging the United States into conflict all over the world. He's threatened our closest allies. He started another unauthorized regime change war in the Middle East. And in this instance, he invaded a sovereign nation and kidnapped its leader. Now, I don't want y'all to get it twisted and believe for any reason that I think Maduro is a saint. But there are processes. A lot of Republicans in Congress and on this committee will argue that Trump's attack on Venezuela will be for the good of the Venezuelan people, as the chairman has laid out. But let me be clear, Donald Trump does not care about the Venezuelan people, and let me give you the receipts on how I know. He said that Venezuelans were invading the United States. He terminated the protected status of more than 350,000 Venezuelans. He deported Venezuelans to El Salvador's terrorist prison, even though many of them had no criminal record. So this was never about helping the Venezuelan people. Donald Trump does not care about Venezuelans at all. To be clear, there is no legal basis for the United States government to invade a sovereign country and kidnap its leader. There is no legal basis for recklessly bombing people who pose no immediate threat to the United States. And the exact language that I believe the chairman used was that this was a precise operation. I don't know if his definition of precise includes the fact that there were at least 40 civilians killed in this operation in Venezuela, and there was a total of 83 persons that were killed during this invasion. But Donald Trump's unlawful military action in Venezuela was never about stopping illicit drugs from entering the United States. According to the DEA's National Drug Threat Assessment, Venezuela has little to no role in smuggling illicit fentanyl into the United States. In fact, DEA has never listed Venezuela as a fentanyl source or transit country. Coast Guard and military data do not show any fentanyl coming from Venezuelan-linked maritime routes. It's interesting because the last thing that I remember hearing about is that the president decided not to consult with Congress before going into Venezuela, but to consult with oil corporate executives. I'll just put that out there. And Donald Trump, he also pardoned former Honduran President Juan Hernandez, who was found guilty in a court of law in these United States of trafficking more than 400 tons of cocaine into the United States, which is double the amount of cocaine that Trump's own State Department estimates was trafficked through the entire country of Venezuela. International drug traffickers love Donald Trump because they know that even if they are arrested, it's easy enough to get a pardon from him. The data shows that Donald Trump is one of the most pro-drug trafficking presidents in modern day history. Since he took office, prosecutions for drug trafficking have fallen to the lowest levels in decades because the agents tasked with going after drug cartels have either been fired or forced to start raiding your local Home Depot, or illegally breaking into the homes of American citizens, or monitoring community schools and churches so that the government can disappear entire families. It was never about protecting Americans. It was never about bringing democracy to Venezuela. It was never about stopping illicit drugs from entering the country. Like everything else this administration does, it was about corruption. The president told oil executives about the planned attack days before it happened. Trump then promised that oil companies would be fully reimbursed by American taxpayers for any investments they make in Venezuela. And once the president illegally took control over Venezuela's oil reserves, the first sale went to the company of a man who donated $6 million to Trump's campaign. This is why the president attacked Venezuela. This was about greed. This was about controlling their oil so that the oil executives who donated to his campaign could make even more money. Not only was this illegal and corrupt, it's also extremely expensive for U.S. taxpayers. The operation to capture Maduro cost taxpayers at least $3 billion. And it is now costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars to maintain the oil tankers that the United States government has seized. And as a Texan, let me tell you, this is not helping those in my state that engage in oil work. This erratic and illegal foreign policy is now responsible for the death of 13 U.S. service members and has made the Republican-caused economic crisis even worse. The final point that I'll make is that, especially as we have young people here, I think there is a lot that we can learn from our youth. I remember as a little girl being told things like 2 wrongs don't make a right. It is very clear that Maduro is a wrong guy, and he may have even been illegally in power. But the idea that you would meet illegality with further illegality does not necessarily make it a right. So as someone who is trained in the law, as someone who still respects the law, as someone who believes that law and order should matter in this country, I can't speak for others. It is a shame that we do not have enough people that understand the Constitution, that are serving in the Congress, and decide that they want to stand up and protect Americans, as we have a lawless 34-count convicted felon that is continuing to engage in illegal actions that are harming both us here domestically, as well as Americans and others abroad. With that, I will yield.
In a blistering address before the House committee, Representative Jasmine Crockett issued a severe indictment of the Trump administration's foreign policy, specifically focusing on the recent military intervention in Venezuela. Speaking to a room filled with young observers, Crockett characterized the operation as a lawless overreach that resulted in the kidnapping of a sovereign leader and the deaths of at least 83 people, including 40 civilians. While acknowledging that Nicolas Maduro is not a saint, the Congresswoman argued that meeting international illegality with further domestic and international illegality violates the core principles of the U.S. Constitution and the global order. Crockett presented a detailed case centered on what she described as receipts of the president's true motivations. She explicitly rejected the notion that the invasion was a humanitarian effort, pointing to the administration's termination of protected status for 350,000 Venezuelans and their subsequent deportation to high-security prisons in El Salvador. Furthermore, she dismantled the administration's justification regarding fentanyl trafficking, citing DEA and Coast Guard data which indicates that Venezuela has virtually no role in the smuggling of illicit fentanyl into the United States. In a startling comparison, Crockett noted that the president's pardon of former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was convicted of trafficking 400 tons of cocaine, undermines any claim that this administration is tough on drugs, labeling the president as one of the most pro-drug trafficking leaders in modern history. The representative's most grave allegations concerned financial corruption and the influence of the energy sector. Crockett alleged that the president bypassed congressional consultation, choosing instead to brief oil corporate executives days before the attack. She claimed that the administration promised these executives full taxpayer reimbursement for Venezuelan investments and that the first sale of seized Venezuelan oil went to a major campaign donor. According to Crockett, the $3 billion operation was not about democracy or public safety, but was a calculated move to control oil reserves for the benefit of political allies. Crockett highlighted the human and economic toll of the conflict, noting the deaths of 13 U.S. service members and a worsening domestic economic crisis. As a lawyer and a Texan, she voiced her profound concern over the erosion of law and order, characterizing the president as a 34-count convicted felon whose erratic actions are causing irreparable harm both domestically and abroad. Her report serves as a formal demand for accountability, suggesting that the current administration has traded constitutional adherence for a policy of greed and international instability.